Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to you, wherever you might be at this time. So I just wanted to kind of put together a quick video explaining PCI DSS. So I do have people reaching out to me, questions about PCI DSS, what is PCI all about? So I just kind of put together this quick, well, hopefully I can go through this in an hour, but it's supposed to help us to know what PCI is all about. And this is just a complete guide for beginners. Okay. So if you already know PCI, then this is not for you. These are for people that are looking to learn about PCI or want to, familiarize themselves with this framework. Okay. So this is a PCI DSS explained in 1 hour, and this is a complete beginner's guide to payment security. And the agenda I will be going over the introduction of PCI. We'll be discussing the key glossary terms, also discussing the applicability of PCI. We're going to look into the scope of PCI DSS. We're also going to discuss the framework of the time frames within PCI compliance and how we approach, implementation and validation of PCI. We'll discuss the importance of protecting the information about the organization's security posture. And then we'll also discuss the PCI testing methodologies. We'll also discuss the PCI assessment processes. Then we'll go over the high-level overview of PCI requirements and the goals of PCI DSS. We'll talk about the best practices of implementing PCI DSS into what we call a business as usual processes. Then we'll talk about the practical steps to achieving PCI compliance. And the documentation that I will be reviewing and going over is the recent documentation for payment card industry data security standard. And this is the requirements and testing procedure. And we'll be going over the requirements. Sorry, we'll be going over the version 4.0.1. So what is PCI DSS? Okay, and PCI DSS is a framework. Okay, and we're going to look at the introduction. So PCI DSS stands for Payment Card Industry Security Standard, and it was developed to encourage and enhance payments security, also to enhance payment account data security, then also to facilitate the broad adoption of consistent data security globally. Okay. Initially, before PCI DSS was formed or the council was formed, all the payment card brands, they had their own standard, and it was causing a lot of confusion. So these industries or these brands, they came together. For example, Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, I believe one from Japan is Japan central bank. I can't remember. It's called JCP. So these card brands, they came together and they said, okay, hey, we want to have consistency in our payment data security measures. So they formed PCI Security Council, and they developed what we call the PCI DSS, which is the Payment Card Industry Security Standard. Now, within this standard, we have goals. We have 6 goals. One is to build, maintain a secure network and systems. The second is to protect card or protect account data. The third one is to maintain a vulnerability management program. And the fourth one is to implement strong access control measures. Then the fifth one is to regularly monitor and test networks. Then the next one is maintaining an information security policy. Then within these 6 goals, we have 12 requirements. And one is to implement and maintain security, to implement and maintain network security controls. Number two is to apply secure configurations to all system components, and all these terminologies we would learn about them in the glossary. Then number three, requirement three talks about protecting stored account data. Requirement four talks about protecting cardholder data with strong cryptography during transmission over open and public networks. Requirement five, we're looking to protecting all systems and networks from malicious software. Requirement six will address developing and maintaining secure systems and software. Requirement seven will look into restricting access to system components and cardholder data by business need to know. Requirement eight addresses identification of users and authentication of access into the system components that is within the CDE. All right, requirement nine talks about restricting physical access to the cardholder data. So for example, that will be, let's say the cardholder data, you have a server room or a data center, or even a location that is being accessed within a PCI or is the scope for PCI. You want to restrict access to those locations or to those environments or to that environment that is used within the PCI scope. The requirement 10 will look into logging and monitoring all access to system components and the cardholder data environment. Requirement 11 will look into testing the security of systems and the networks regularly. Then requirement 12, which is the last requirement, is addressing the supporting of information security with the organizational policies and programs. Now, the key glossaries we're going to look into here is one, what is account data? Okay, so account data, and the reason why I'm doing this first, so that when we are reviewing certain things, it will make sense. So account data consists of what we call cardholder data or sensitive authentication data. Acquirer refers to a merchant bank or the acquiring bank, okay? And all they do is that they process payment card, okay? So all the transactions from the merchant can be like Walmart or anyone that is, processing the card, they do that, okay? So the acquirer helps the merchant to process all their payment card transactions. Then another one is the anti-malware. So anti-malware is a software that is designed to detect, remove, block, or contain all forms of malicious software. AOC, this is very important. So AOC is what we call attestation of compliance, and it is an official PCI DSS form for merchants and service providers to show their results. Okay, so in that AOC, you can either have it as pass, and it can be fail, depending on what the AOC dictates. Okay, but just to address this is that the AOC is just a document that must be used for official use. And now there's a difference between the AOC and the ROC, which we'll talk about. So the next one is the ASV. ASV refers to the approved scanning vendor. And what they do is that they conduct external vulnerability scanning services for the organization. All right, then audit log refers also to audit trail. And this is just a chronological record of system activities. So for example, your servers, right? So anyone that logs into it, everything that's performed on that server needs to be configured to have what we call an audit log. So that way, if anything should happen, you can review the logs to see what happened. All right, then the next one is authentication factor. And what this means is that it helps to verify the individual or the identity of that individual. or a process of a computer system. So what is required is something that you know, which is a password, or something you have can be a token, or something that you are, that might be a biometric element. Then BAU is referred as business as usual. You'll see that in the PCI requirements. Then bespoke and custom software. So you can see here that bespoke software is something that is developed for organization by a third party. Okay. Now, a custom software is developed by the organization for its own use. So if the organization buys a software from a third party, that is what we call a bespoke. A custom software is a software that was developed by the organization or that company for its own use. Then we have another term that we're looking into is a card verification code, which is also known as the CVV. Okay, and that is the three-digit number or four-digit number at the back of your card. For example, when you call, the organization was like, okay, can you please verify and give me the last three, right? So that's what we call the card verification code. Then the card holder means or represents the customer to which the card was issued or an authorized individual to use that credit card. Then we have the cardholder data, which is also known as the CHD, and it consists of the 16-digit number, which is called PAN, but it's called the primary account number. And this number appears in front of the card, right? So cardholder data consists of the 16-digit number, the customer name, expiration date, and or the service code. So CED, you will hear this a lot within PCI, when they're doing PCI assessment. Okay, so all it stands for is that it means card holder data environment. And the card holder data environment comprises of people, processes, system components that store, process, or transmit cardholder data and or sensitive authentication data. Okay, and also within the CDE we have system components that may not store, process, or transmit, but they have unrestricted connectivity to the systems that is processing, transmitting, or storing cardholder data or sensitive authentication data. So that is what we consider the CDE, which is the cardholder data environment. Change control is very important. Change control is a process or a procedure that reviews or tests and approves changes within the system or software for impact before implementation. So this is very, very crucial for PCI DSS, not only PCI DSS, for compliance, period. Within PCI, there's something we call clear text data, and that all it means is that it is unencrypted data. Compensating control, we'll discuss about that in the other, but it's just a control that is used in place if a particular PCI requirement or sub-requirement is not functioning properly or for any reason, then you can have what we call a compensating control to make sure that that is in place to reduce the risk or mitigate that risk for that PCI requirement not being there, okay? I will go into that later. Okay, so we have here consumers, we have, and all it means is that individual cardholder purchasing goods and services. So that's a customer. So if I as an individual, I go to Walmart or to Target or to any store to purchase goods and services, right? I am considered a consumer. Critical systems. So all this means is that, and you will hear this a lot, okay? Because within PCI, yes, PCI, we have critical systems, but there are some systems that are more critical than others, right? So we want to identify those systems. For an example, any system that is in the production environment, that is considered a critical environment or critical system. Now, we might have a server that might not be critical because it is in the development environment or it's in the test environment. So that might not be considered critical because it might not contain PCI data, right? So it's very important to know the difference between a critical system within PCI and non-critical systems as well. Okay, so within PCI, we have something called a customized approach. We'll discuss that during the implementation and validation of PCI section. Data flow diagram is a diagram that shows how or where data flows within the organization in terms of application systems, networks, and I would say within your third-party third-party companies. Now, I heard this somewhere, which is a very good way to do this. So your data flow diagram should show how money flows within the organization. Okay, so from accepting the credit card to let's say if that's recharge or settlement, authorization, that data flow diagram should show that. So they said follow the money. Okay, so if you have an application that is within PCI DSS scope, that application should have what we call the data flow diagram, and that should show how money is being going through the application to the system through the network. Okay, it's very important. Then not default account. Default account, we're looking into or is addressing login accounts that came with the application or with the server or with the system. So those are what we call default accounts that the manufacturer or the vendor had put there for testing purposes. Okay. Then default password, the same thing. So it's a password that was published and is actually can be published in the internet. So if you just, for example, go and type Oracle database, for example, you can find the default account and the default password. And that's the reason why we need to have this changed, because if not, there can be issues. A hacker can just run, and it has happened. All right. So what is a defined approach? We'll discuss that now. Disk encryption is just a technology or a technique for encrypting all stored data on a device. And that can be on a flash drive, it can be on a hard disk, okay? Now, within PCI, there are two things we need to know. We have what we call a file level encryption, and we also have a column level encryption, okay? So that will determine how you will perform your assessment, okay? Because that's file level, and that's also actually also a field level as well. DMZ, okay? It's just a physical or logical subnetwork that provides an additional layer of security within the organization internal private network. An entity in PCI context represents an organization or a company or business that is undergoing the PCI assessment. Firewall is very important for requirement 1. So it refers to a software or a hardware that is used to protect the network resources from unauthorized access. And all firewall does is that it's looking into all the traffic between the network based on the rules to deny or accept. Okay. IDS is network intrusion detection system. Issuer, very important. Now, an issuer is also known as an issuing bank. And what does an issuer perform? They issue the credit card or perform or support some sort of issuing services. So when you hear issuer, know that it's referring to the organization that issues you that credit card, right? Or can be performing, facilitating, or supporting that issuing services. We've talked about that already. So log, we also talked about the log, which is the audit log. We talked about already. Now, the magnetic stripe, it talks about, if you look at your credit card behind it, if you see that black stripe, that's what it means. That's what it is. Okay. And within that contains what we call track data. So all your, if you remember, we talked about the account data, we talked about the customer cardholder data and the sensitive authentication data. That is in that black stripe, and that's what it's saying. So masking is just a method of concealing a segment of the 16 digit, which is also known as the primary account data PAN. Okay, so depending, it can be however the organization wants to do that. So, but you're concealing a section or a segment of that 16 digit for business use. So, if an end user, when I mean an end user, let's say the customer rep doesn't have the business need to see that 16-digit number, then they can mask it. Or for verification purposes, they can show the last four, but they'll max the rest. Okay. Then a merchant is, for the purpose of PCI, merchant is someone that accepts payment card. Okay. So if you're doing business and you're accepting credit card, you are considered a merchant by a PCI DSS. All right, then multi-factor authentication, we talked about this already, but in this case, a multi-factor authentication is a method of authenticating a user, at least by using two authentication, two factors. So it can be what you know, who you are, or what you have. Network diagram shows all the system components and the connection between the network, the application, the system. So a network diagram shows the connectivity within the network environment. So this is actually a new term that was that was introduced for 4.0. So the network security controls. Before, it was network devices, but it was changed in 4.0 and they made it network security controls. So it is your firewall or any other network security technologies that is being used or is being used as a network policy enforcement point. Okay, so it can be your firewall or it can be any other network security technologies. Okay, then a non-console access, what that means is that we have logical access to system components that occurs over a network interface. So all it means, for example, is that when you, for example, people that work from remote, but they have to log into the server, that is what we consider a non-console access. However, if you are in the data center and you are in the data center and you're touching the machine, logging into that machine, then that is considered console access. Okay. So you have to understand the difference. PAN, we've talked about this, all it's talking about is the primary account number. And all I can say to this is that it's your 16-digit number in front of your card. It can be credit card, it can be a debit card, it can be also prepaid card. Okay. So those number in front of it, it is called a primary account number. A payment brand, we talked about this before, but the payment brand regulates how or where payment card or any other form of factor carrying this logo. So the payment brand also is a participant within the PCI Council. Okay. Payment card, for the purpose of PCI, is any payment card form that bears the logo of the participant or participating payment brand. Payment channel, this is very important. So when you are performing your PCI assessment, if you want to understand the environment, you need to understand your payment channel. How is the organization accepting payment? Is it over the phone? Is it over the internet? What are the, or so that's two. Okay, so that's e-commerce. That's in. Okay, then we have mail order or over the phone. Okay, so what are the payment channels? It can be card present. Okay, or card not present. So what are the common payment card channels? I want to repeat this. We have card present. That's when you are in person, you're making a payment, and card not present. That's either you're doing over the phone or over the internet. Payment page. This is simple. Just means that you have it's a website where payments have been accepted. So it's very important. And this is also introduced in 4.0, where we have to access the payment page scripts. Payment processor, sometimes it's also known as payment gateway. And this entity is engaged by the merchant. Okay. So what it means is that you as a merchant, if I am doing business, I can have a company like Stripe. They are considered a payment processor. So I'll have the script on my website, and whenever a customer makes a payment on my website, it goes, Stripe will not process that payment. So Stripe is considered a payment processor. Okay. A PIN, we know that a PIN is a personal identification number. Now, we have a POI, which is a point of interaction. So a POI refers to the initial point where data is read from a card. So for example, go to Chick-fil-A or all those companies where they have POI, so POS, but the first point where that card is read is a POI. Now we have a POS system, which we'll address next. And it's a hardware and software that is used by merchants to, one, accept payment from customers, but that may include a POI device, okay? Or it can include a cash register. QSA is a qualified security assessor, and this is for level 1 merchant or a level 2 merchant that would like to use a third party to perform assessment. Okay, we'll discuss all that later. Then ROC. ROC is what we call a report of compliance, and it's a reporting tool to document detailed results of the organization's PCI DSS assessment. Now, this is only for a company that's considered a level 1 merchant. And what does that mean? A company that is accepting over 6 million cards transaction a year, you are considered a level 1. Okay. And I will go into details where, when appropriate, I'll mention certain things. All right, now SACD, sorry, we have what we call a SAC, which is a self-assessment questionnaire. And this, I know I mentioned SACD, it's just I had performed something, SACD assessment for an organization, so that's why that just came to my mind. But it's just a self-assessment questionnaire, and it's a reporting tool where you can document your self-assessment result before you submit that to the acquiring bank. Scoping. Now, scoping is a process of identifying all the system components, people, processes within PCI. Segmentation is just the isolation of components that stores, process, and transmit cardholder data from the system that do not. Because if not, all the systems, all the environment will be in scope if you don't have segmentation. Right? Sensitive environment or sensitive areas in PCI refers to a subset of CDE, and it houses systems that are so critical to PCI environment or to the CDE, and that can be, for example, your server room, your back room, your data centers, right? So you can mark those areas as sensitive areas. Then sensitive authentication data, we talked about that before, but we will discuss further actually in the presentation what we consider sensitive authentication data. Service code, we've talked about that. Service provider is an entity that is working on your behalf to either process, transmit, or store cardholder data, and or they might be performing some sort of function that grants them access to your CDE, or their function might impact the security of your CDE. You have to assess them, okay? System components, we talked about that. It's just servers, network devices, computing devices that connect to the CDE or is part of the CDE. Targeted risk assessment. This is something that was introduced as well within PCI DSS version 4.0. I've talked about third-party providers already. We talked about track data. Truncation is also used to render a full pen unreadable, okay? Then trusted network. This is very important. So when you hear the word trusted network, all it's saying is that this is your CDE, okay? That is your trusted network. Now, untrusted network is just referring to the internet. So your organizations, sometimes what they do is that they have the trusted network, they have the semi-trusted network, and they now have the untrusted network. So the untrusted network is the internet and should not have access to the trusted network. Now, the semi might, right? So know that when you hear untrusted, is referring to the access internet connectivity from the internet. So we have a virtual payment terminal, and it's just a browser that grants access to the acquirer. Okay, so it is a web browser based access. Okay, and what it does is that the merchant can manually enter a credit card through the web browser. Okay, instead of you swiping. So let's say you go to a store, you're not able to swipe. The merchant will have an access either by website, and they can manually enter your payment information and process the payment. Visitor, a visitor can be a vendor or a visitor can be a vendor or personnel or a worker, right? That normally will not have access to that area. So you can say, hey, that's a visitor, and for security purposes, for requirement 9, they need to be what we call badged in so that you can track their movement, right? When they come in and when they go out. So vulnerability, what is vulnerability? Vulnerability is just a weakness that can be exploited that might result in an intentional or an unintentional compromise of a system. All right, so we will be addressing PCI applicability. All right, so now the next section that we'll be going over is PCI applicability. All right, so PCI DSS applicability information, and this is that PCI DSS is intended for all entities or all organizations that are either processing, storing, or transmitting cardholder data and or sensitive authentication data, or any entity that could impact the security of your cardholder data and your sensitive authentication data. This also includes all entities that might be involved in payment account processing. So that includes the merchants, the processors, the payment processors, the acquirers, the issuers, and any other service providers. Okay, and it's very important that this entity, they are required to comply with or validate their compliance to PCI DSS. Okay, then, however, it is at the discretion of those organizations to make sure that the company, for example, that is a third party doing or performing some sort of payment processing, that they are PCI compliant. And or if they're not PCI compliant, you have to make sure that you are assessing these controls, because not all organizations might have the funds to be assessed as a PCI service provider. Okay. Now, now let's go to the definition. So an account data consists of what we call cardholder data and sensitive authentication data. And as you can see here, cardholder data includes what I call the 16-digit credit card number. Okay, now PCI says is primary account number, but just for us that are not familiar with what that means, it's referring to that credit card number. Okay, so your credit card number is what is referred here as the primary account number. Now, within your cardholder data includes that credit card number. It includes your name, which is the cardholder name, expiration date, and service code. Now, the sensitive authentication data, if you have a credit card, if you look at the back of your credit card, you have that black stripe, right? That's on the card. Now, that black stripe contains everything, sensitive information about that card. Okay. So, and also if your card has a chip, that chip contains everything that concerns that card. Okay. So it is very important that it is protected. So that's why I say so. However, your sensitive authentication data includes what we call the full track. It contains the card verification code and also contains the PIN or the PIN blocks. Now, PCI DSS applies to all entities with the environment where cardholder data, which is your card data and sensitive authentication data, is stored, transmitted, or processed. Okay, and any other entity with the environment that could impact the security of your cardholder data. And it is very important that we need to know this. Okay, so very, very, very important. Okay, now, as you can see here, this is an important note. The primary card number, which is your PAN, is the defining factor of your cardholder data. Okay. Now, if you can see here, it says if cardholder name, service code, and or expiration date are stored, processed, and transmitted with your PAN, or are otherwise present in the CDE, then you must protect it according to PCI DSS requirements. Okay, so see that important note. So whenever that PAN is present, and present means you can say, hey, but it's encrypted. Yes, it's still present. Now, the only time it's not present if you use what we call tokenization. Okay, so it's very important. So I wanted to bring this out. Okay, so you must protect your cardholder name, service code, expiration date, whatever is stored, processed, or transmitted, if it's transmitted with the 16-digit number or the credit card number, okay? Or it might be present in the database, okay? So if it's present in the database and that database contains the what do you call it, the customer name, so the cardholder name, expiration date, and all that, then that database needs to be protected. Now, if the database has what calls a token, okay, it's just a unique value that was exchanged, due to using some sort of technology or technique, okay. So it's just scramble, it's just exchange. The system provides you a token, okay, but that token is not your 16-digit number, right? Because that tool, it converts or does some sort of mathematical equation or however they did it, and now provided a token for you. Now, if that token is not stored on that database with the cardholder name and all that cardholder data, then it's no longer, you don't need to protect it because that token is not the primary account data. Does that make sense? So I wanted to point that out. Okay, so if any entity stores, process, or transmit PAN, they need to abide by the PCI DSS. Now, there might be instances where that entity might not need to be assessed. For example, okay, if you have if you're not, remember, if you're not storing, now requirement 3 is deals with protecting stored account data. Now, if your organization is not storing, right, because they're using tokenization to do that, to change the value of that cardholder data into another value, which is not associated with your cardholder data, right? Now, that environment will not be assessed for requirement 3. So that's what it's saying here, okay? So it's just giving an example, okay? So it's important to know when your organization, if it's not storing, then there's certain requirements that might not be applicable. But if it's processing and transmitting, yes, then some other requirements might be applicable. Another important note here is that we need to make sure that we are not interchanging the definition. So, for example, we have the account data, we have the sensitive authentication data, cardholder data, and the primary account data. They are different, and the terms cannot be used interchangeably. So you will not cause confusion, okay? So there's account data, and that is your sensitive authentication data, and that is your account data, sorry, your cardholder data, and that is your primary account number, okay? So it's very, 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 very important to note that these are different and cannot be used interchangeably. All right, so the next one is scope for PCI DSS. And within PCI DSS, for us to know what we are working with or what we are going to assess, we need to know our scope. Now, how do we know our scope? PCI DSS defines that for us. PCI DSS requirements applies to cardholder data with environment. So there's a cardholder data environment, which is called, also known as a CDE. And this includes, 1, system components, people and processes that store, transmit, and process cardholder data and or sensitive authentication data. And also components, system components that may not store, it might not process, it might not transmit cardholder data and sensitive authentication data, but it has unrestricted connectivity to the components that store, process, or transmit cardholder data and sensitive authentication data. That will be part of your scope. Now, another thing also is that system components, people and processes that could impact the security of your cardholder data and sensitive authentication data is part of the scope. Okay. So what does PCI define as system component? And here we have, for example, network devices, the servers, computing devices, and the computing devices can be like your desktop, your workstation, your laptop. If your laptop is used for, let's say, for like in the call center, and that laptop is used to process payments or something like that, then it's also going to be part of that laptop is accessing the CDE, then we need a list of all the systems, all the assets that are accessing that, okay? So all the computing devices within that CDE or that is connecting to that CDE, we need a list of it. Then virtual components, that can be like your VMware. For Oracle, we have VirtualBox. So if you're using those virtual components to spin up servers, that particular component needs to be part of the system components that will be assessed for PCI. Then you have your cloud. Okay, so for example, I have Oracle, sorry, not Oracle. I mean, we have Oracle Cloud, but we have AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. Okay, now within Google Cloud, you might have platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, and you spin up servers, right? Now, if you spin up a server in an infrastructure as a service environment, that particular server, if it is being used for any of these mentioned, okay? Whether it's to you have a database that is running on it, or that server is used for authentication server, or as long as it's performing some function that would affect your CDE, or is transmitting or storing or processing, then that server, even though it's in the cloud, is part of your CDE. Okay. Now, let's see what else. So we have a great example here. Okay, so you can see here systems that are used to facilitate segmentation, right? Is going to be part of it. Okay, I mentioned about the cloud infrastructure. I also mentioned about the the authentication servers. So those are considered system components. And now we'll now go over the understanding of PCI DSS assessments, scoping. And you can see here, we're going to look at the category 1, that's what I call category 2, and we'll also look at category 3. All right, now we'll be going over understanding PCI DSS scoping. So you can see the highlighted area, we will consider that category 1. All right, and in the category 1 section, we have what we call the CDE. Now, within your CDE, which is your cardholder data environment, any system that stores, process, or transmit cardholder data or sensitive authentication data is considered your CDE. Or any system that is on the same network with your CDE or has unrestricted connectivity to the systems that is processing, storing, or transmitting cardholder data and sensitive authentication data is in scope for PCI DSS. And that's what we call, or that's what I will consider category 1 device. Okay, so your category 2 is what we consider, or what we call, a connected to. So any system that is connected that's connected directly to your CDE, which is your category 1, right? Or any system that is connected indirectly to your CDE is also category 2. Any system that might impact the configuration or security of your CDE, or any system that provides security to your CDE, or any system that helps with the segmentation, right, of your CDE, or any system that might support any other PCI DSS requirements for your organization. This is called a category 2, and is also known as a connected to device, which will be in scope for your PCI DSS. Now, category 3 is what we consider out of scope. And what does that say? Okay, hold on, let me move this around. Okay, so out of scope devices, out of scope systems is what we call, or what I will consider, category 3. I'm not saying that's what it's called, but it's something that will help. Okay, so we know we have category 1, category 2, and category 3. Now, category 3 is what we consider out of scope. 1, it does not store or process cardholder data. It's not on the same subnet. Okay. 3, it's not connected to any of your other systems that is in category 1 or category 2. Okay. Then if the system components does not meet any other criteria described, It's not, it's out of scope. Okay. So this is very important. So have this in mind, whenever you want to perform your assessment, you want to understand your scoping, you can use this diagram. All right, now when you're performing your annual PCI scoping confirmation, the first thing that you need to do is actually address requirement 12.5.2. I won't go much into that, because you can see on the screen here, but the first step of preparing PCI assessment is to accurately determine what your scope will be. Okay, so and that would, for example, you need to identify all your locations, flow of your account data, identify all the systems that is connected to, okay, or that could impact the security of your CDE. Okay, now the minimum step here is to confirm the accuracy of your PCI DSS scope. And you can see here the screen listed. Those are the things that you need to look into. Okay, you want to identify all the locations where account data is stored, processed, and transmitted. I don't want to go into this. Just go and look into requirement 12.5.2. Now, this is a very important information. Segmentation just means the isolation, okay, of the environment that is in CDE and not in CDE. But the reason why it is important is because if you have segmentation, now let's take a step back. PCI is saying that segmentation is not a recommendation, so it's not required, sorry, but it's recommended. And the reason being is that if you do not have segmentation in place, it's what we consider a flat network. Okay, so what does that mean? That means all the organization's environment will be assessed. But if you have segmentation in place, then you can say, okay, hey, segmentation is in place to isolate all the environment, all the systems, all the people, all the processes that are handling cardholder data from the environment that does not. That will save you a lot of headache. Two, that will save you a lot of money. And the challenges of maintaining and implementing PCI DSS in an environment that's considered a flat network is challenging, and it's not recommended. Okay, I'll just tell you that. Now, I've worked, assessed how I've worked with a client where they didn't have that, right? But that was part of my recommendation. And that's what they did the next time. And they were able to reduce the cost and the scope. Okay, so an important, okay, let's see here. So it's also important to reduce the scope for PCI DSS. So one is having a clear understanding of the business need and processes. If you do not understand the business needs and their processes when it comes to either storing, transmitting, or processing account data, it's going to be very, very challenging. Okay, so you might run into a situation where you might discover new things, new environments, or new servers, or new systems that was not there before. So it is very important that business processes and business are understood. Restricting account data to few locations is very, very good, because then you eliminate unnecessary data and consolidating necessary data. Okay. All right. So this is also very important when you are performing your assessment. So if you are using wireless technologies to store, process, and transmit cardholder data, that network needs to be assessed. And you can see here that is addressing requirement 11.2, and wireless access points must be identified and monitored, and unauthorized wireless access points must be addressed. And the sub requirement for this is requirement 11.2.1. Okay. So it is very important that if an environment or organization is using wireless to perform any sort of payment operations, they need to access that wireless network. All right. So timeframes that are being used in PCI DSS requirements. All right, so you can see here daily, we have weekly, monthly, every 3 months, every 6 months, every 12 months, periodically, immediately. So when you hear the word immediately, that's without delay. Okay, when you hear promptly, as soon as reasonably possible. Okay, then you can see here within 6 months, if you see every 6 months or biannually, so it's sent at least once every 100 to 184 days. You need to perform whatever that PCI says, if it says it's every 6 months or biannually. Now, this is very, very important, okay? When you hear significant change. So when there's a significant change, well, what does PCI require, consider significant change? Now, when a new hardware or software or network device or equipment is added to the CDE, that's considered a significant change. Any replacement or major upgrade to the hardware or software within the CDE, that's considered a significant change. Or any change to the flow of the account data, or any change to the boundaries of CDE, okay? Any change to the underlying supporting infrastructure of the CDE, okay? Any change to your vendor, all right, that is supporting CDE or supporting any function within your CDE. If you have a new vendor, you need to, that's considered a significant change, and that should be addressed, and there's the things that, we need to do when there's significant change, such as, performing pen test, that's the things you need to do, okay? But we'll talk about that later. All right, now, this section will be addressing the approaches for implementing and validating PCI DSS. In PCI DSS, we have a defined approach, okay, and we have customized approach. So you can see here on the chart on the slide, I'm using, for example, 1.2.5. You can see here PCI DSS shows that in the defined approach requirement, for example, for 1.2.5, it says that all services, protocols, and ports allowed are identified, approved, and have a defined business need. Okay, so for a defined approach, it's just a traditional method for implementing and validating the PCI DSS and the use of its requirements, okay, and the testing procedures. Now, this was introduced as well in version 4.0. It wasn't in the version 3.2.1. Okay, so this 4.0 allows companies, and this is for customized approach. Okay, so if you have, or if your organization is, the risk is matured, all right, it's a matured organization when it comes to risk, then they can afford to go with the customized approach depending on the complexity of the environment. Okay, so PCI now gives the organizations the free hand, as long as you can prove that you can meet this requirement using customized approach, then that's fine. Okay, all right. Now we're looking at the next section will be protecting information of your organization's security posture. And what does this mean? So let's say you're new to PCI, there's something that you need to know. Your report of compliance should not be given to people that are not authorized. So when you start or when you join a new organization, one of the things you need to know is that who is authorized to see the organization's ROC, which is the report of compliance. Okay, not everybody, because it contains a lot of sensitive and confidential information about your organization, such as your IP addresses, everything, I'm telling you. So you should not forward that to anyone that's not authorized by the organization. Now, the AOC, yes, you can. Okay, because sometimes a vendor that wants to do business with your company might say, hey, can you prove to me that your organization is PCI compliant? Then you give them the AOC, not the rock. Okay. Then another thing that you need to protect is your network diagrams, your data flow diagrams, okay? Configuration settings and configuration rules. You need to protect that. The system configuration standards, okay? Or any key management and cryptography protocols. You need to protect that information. Okay. Then this one also deals with third-party service providers. So if they are required to support their vendor or their customer, sorry, okay, and requirement 12.9 is applicable to them. All right, now within PCI DSS, or let's say any compliance framework, the framework will provide you methods of testing to make sure that that control or that requirement or sub-requirement is in place and working as intended, okay? So for PCI DSS, these are the testing methodology or testing methods that we have for PCI. So we have examine, observe, and interview. So within the examine section, the assessor, which can be either you, which is if you are an internal security assessor, or you are performing an internal audit, or the QSA, which is the third party coming to perform an assessment, for a level one merchant. So when you hear the word examine, so the assessor would examine the data or the evidence, and there can be screenshots, it can be the data files or whatever that's provided to meet that to show that that control is being met. Okay, then for the observation, the assessor, you can watch an action. Okay, so okay, can you perform this action? Can you log in? Can you do this? And I want to make sure that you are meeting that control. Okay. So for example, okay, this one, okay, let's say, okay, that example I don't think will not have been a good example, but let's use an example like let's say looking at the physical control. Okay. So someone wants to badge in, right? So you observe, okay, when the person badges in, what is the process? Or if can someone just what they call when you are assessing requirement 9, what we call tailgating, and the organization puts in their policy that there's no tailgating, right? You want to make sure that when employees are coming in, that all of them are badging in, that no one is tailgating each other. So you're observing that process, right? Then another one is interview. So you interview the personnel to make sure that they are doing what either the policy states or the process or the procedure states. Okay, so you interview them to make sure that one, they have the knowledge, and two, they understand what they're doing and they're following their policy or their procedure. Now, when it comes to PCI assessments, according to PCI, these are the assessments. Okay, so one, you need to confirm the scope of your PCI assessment, perform PCI assessment of the environment. Then number three, complete the applicable report of the assessment according to PCI DSS guidance and instructions. Then number four, you complete your attestation of compliance, whether it's for merchants or for service provider as applicable. Okay. Then once you're done with number four, then number five, you submit the applicable documentation and the AOC, okay, and other documentation such as the scan reports, whatever the acquired bank requires, okay. Then number six, if required, you perform remediation to address the requirements that is not in place and provide an updated report. All right, now we have what we call merchant level. And within this merchant level, we have level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So any company or any person that is processing more than 6 million cards per year is a level 1. Any company that is processing more than or between 1 million and 6 million, that's level 2. Any company that's processing between 20,000 to 1 million card transaction a year is level 3. And level 4, anyone that is processing less than 20,000 cards of processing 20,000 card transaction payments per year is considered a level 4. All right. All right. High level of PCI requirements. I'm not going to go into details, okay, because of this was just to give us a high level overview of PCI DSS. Now, in other videos, I will go into details about that. Okay, so now for requirement 1, we're looking at installing and maintaining network security controls. Now, within within requirement 1.1, sorry, within requirement 1, we have requirement 1.1, which is it looks into the processes and mechanism for installing, maintaining network security controls. We want to make sure it's defined and understood, and that can be like your policies, okay, your processes and your documentation showing your procedures. Then 1.2, the network security controls, we want to make sure it's configured and maintained. 1.3, that the network access to and from the cardholder data environment is restricted. Section 1 requirement PCI 1.4. Okay, we have network connections between the trusted and the untrusted networks. We want to make sure that is controlled. We don't want people from the internet accessing your trusted network. Then 1.5 is want to understand, make sure that the risk to your CDE from your competing devices, it can be like your, people connecting remotely, right? So that are able to connect to both your network, that are able to connect from the internet and to the CDE. You want to make sure that those risks are mitigated. So I'll repeat this again. So 1.5 is looking at the risk to the CDE from computing devices that are able to connect from the internet to your cardholder data. So we want to make sure that those risks are mitigated. Requirement 2 talks about applying secure configurations to all system components. And 2.1 looks into the process and mechanism for applying secure configuration to all system components. We want to make sure it's defined and understood, okay? And that can be your policy, processes, and procedures. Then 2.2, system components, we want to make sure that they are configured and managed securely. Then for your wireless environments, that is for 2.3, we want to make sure that all your wireless environments within your CDE are configured and maintained securely. Requirement 3, we're looking at or addressing or we need to protect stored account data. 3.1, processes and mechanism for protecting stored cardholder data. We want to make sure it's understood and defined, and that has to do with your policy. It has to do with your processes and procedures. Then 3.2, storage of account data, want to make sure it's kept to a minimum. The requirement 3.3 talks about sensitive authentication data. Want to make sure that it's not stored after authorization. And like I said, I'm just going high level. This is, we're not going into the sub requirements. That will be for a different lecture. All right, so requirement, so 3.4, access to displays of full PAN and ability to copy the PAN is restricted. 3.5, your primary account number, want to make sure is secure whenever it's stored. Then cryptographic keys used, we want to make sure is protected. Okay, so when you're using cryptographic keys to protect your stored account data, we want to make sure that those keys are secure. Okay, Then no 3.7, so wherever cryptography is used, okay, we want to make sure that we have good key management processes and procedures covering all the aspects of life cycle, okay? We want to make sure it's defined and implemented, all right? Requirement 4, addresses the protection of cardholder data with strong cryptography during transmission over open and public network. So when, of course, when you hear open and public network, that's referring to the internet. So this requirement addresses that. So when you are transmitting cardholder data or card account data over the internet, requirement 4 addresses that you need to protect that with strong cryptography. Now, 4.1 addresses the policy, the processes, and the mechanism, right, for protecting your cardholder data with strong cryptography over the internet. You want to make sure that the people performing this role and responsibilities, they understand their processes, and the processes that is defined clearly, okay? Because if it's not defined clearly, then people performing these roles will not know what is their role or what is their responsibility. They will say, oh, no, it's the other team. The other team said, no, I thought it was own, yeah, and before you know it, then that particular control is not being addressed. So for that role, makes it clear we need to define who is responsible for what. Then 4.2, so it talks about the PAN. We want to make sure that is protected with strong cryptography over transmission. Requirement 5. Now, requirement 5, if you see, is addressing maintaining a vulnerability management program. So requirement 5 and 6 is about maintaining a vulnerability management program. Requirement 5 here is about protecting all system networks from malicious software. Sorry, guys, it's 12 a.m. in my time, so it's time for me to go to bed. But I just like to do this because I have people reaching out to me. So hopefully this content is helpful, okay, for beginners, for PCI people. All right, now for 5.1 is referring to the processes and mechanism for storing all for protecting all systems network from malicious software. We want to make sure that we have policies defined, and that everyone that is performing a role within requirement 5 understands this. Then 5.2, we want to make sure that the malware will have malicious software and is able to prevent, detect, and address viruses or malware, okay? 5.3, anti-malware mechanisms and processes will need to be active, maintained, and monitored. Then 5.4, anti-phishing mechanisms, we want to make sure that the organization has that in place so it can protect users from against phishing attacks. Then requirement 6 is developing and maintaining secure systems and software. Requirement 6.1, like I said, when you see processes and mechanism, is referring to policies. So when it comes to maintaining secure systems and software, we want to make sure that all the roles and responsibilities, they understand the policies, the processes, and is understood by everyone. Okay. Then 6.2, bespoke and custom software, we want to make sure that it's developed securely. Then remember, in bespoke software refers to a software that is being developed by a third party for your company. Okay, that's bespoke. Now, custom software is the software that your developers in your organization designed or developed for the use of the organization. Okay, so that we can understand the difference. 6.3, it refers to the security vulnerabilities. We want to make sure it is addressed and identified. 6.4, public-facing web applications. We want to make sure it's protected against attacks. And if we go into the sub-controls for this or sub-requirements, it talks about, for example, making sure that you have what we call a WAF, WAF, web web-based firewall application. And those are things you can use to implement and address requirement 6.4. But like I said, I'm not going to, all the controls. 6.5, it talks about changes to all system components. We want to make sure that it's managed securely. And that goes back to change management controls. If you do not have a good change management control in place, your organization will fail this requirement 6.5. Because how, PCI, not only PCI, any other compliance framework wants to make sure that whenever a change is made to your organization or to a software, to your environment, that is tracked properly, that the changes were approved by the right people. You don't want someone coming to an environment and making changes without having the right authorization. So if you cannot prove that, you're going to fail 6.5. All right, requirement 7. It talks about restricted access to system components and cardholder data by business need to know. 7.1 refers to the policies, processes, and procedures that are used to restrict access to system components. And also when it comes to the cardholder data that is only accessible based on your business need to know. We want to make sure that everyone that's accessing that, the cardholder data or the system components, that they understand that there's a policy for that, there's a procedure for that, okay, and that is a process, okay. Everyone understands what their role is. Then 7.2, we are looking into the access to system components and data. We want to make sure it's appropriately defined and accessed. Requirement 7.3 is access to system components and data. We want to make sure it's being managed through a access control system, okay? And that can be either, some organizations might use like what they call it, Active Directory, okay? So whatever that access control system that is, your organization wants to make sure that requirement 7.3 is being addressed. Requirement 8, we need to identify users and authentication access, or so identify users and authenticate access to system components. 8.1 is processes and mechanism for identifying users and authenticating access to these system components. We want to make sure it is defined and understood. 8.2, user authentication and related accounts for users and administrators. We want to make sure it's strictly managed through an account lifecycle, okay? Requirement 8.3, we have strong authentication for users and administrators. We want to make sure it's established and managed properly. 8.4, want to make sure that the MFA, which is a multi-factor authentication, is implemented to secure access to your cardholder data environment. 8.5 is also making sure that the multi-factor authentication systems are configured to prevent misuse. Then 8.6, use of systems and use of application and system accounts and associated authentication factors. We want to make sure it's strictly managed. Requirement 9 was referring to the restricting of physical access to cardholder data. So 9.1, processes and mechanism, which is, like I said, is always policies, okay? Want to make sure that the roles and responsibilities within risk requirement 9 for restricting physical access, we want to make sure that it is defined and understood by all roles within requirement 9. 9.2 of physical access controls, we want to make sure it's managed. So when it comes to the physical access controls for managing of the entry or people entering into the facilities and systems containing the cardholder data, we want to make sure it's managed properly. 9.3, physical access for personnel and visitors are authorized and managed. So what does this mean is that you need to know the difference between a personnel working in the company and a visitor. So that's why you see some organizations or companies, they will have a different badge color for visitors, or they might have a different color badge for the people working in that organization. So we want to make sure that it's managed properly and they are authorized. You don't want someone just walking into your building and just have access to sensitive areas. 9.4, we're looking into media. So media with cardholder data, want to make sure it is secure. Okay, so we start properly, secured properly, and also it is distributed and destroyed properly. Then 9.5, so we have a point of interaction. And a point of interaction, if you remember, it is the initial point where your data is being received. So if you are using a POS system, or let's say you went to a restaurant, right? That device, that first initial point where your credit card is being used, that is the point of interaction. Okay, so we want to make sure that that device or it is protected, and it cannot be tampered with easily. And that's what requirement 9.5 addresses. Requirement 10, it looks into your login and monitoring of all access to components, systems, and cardholder data. Requirement 10.1, of course, as always, policy processes, okay? So when it comes to maintaining or logging, so when it comes to logging and monitoring of all access to your component systems and the cardholder data, we want to make sure that the policy is defined and understood. Then 10.2, we're looking into the audit logs. We want to make sure it's implemented to support the detection, okay, of suspicious activities, okay, and forensic. So because if something happens, you can also use that for forensic analysis. 10.3, audit log are protected from destruction and unauthorized modification. 10.4, we want to make sure is addressing audit logs to make sure that it's reviewed to identify suspicious activities or any form of anomalies, okay? 10.5 is addressing audit log history. So we want to make sure that audit log history is retained and available for analysis, okay? 10, and if within PCI, it tells you the retention period, okay? 10.6, you're looking at the time synchronization mechanism that is supporting consistent time setting across all the systems in the organization. We want to make sure it is protected, okay? Because it is, you don't want a hacker to hack into your attack environment and not have access to change time, all right? And that's not good, right? Because that means they can cover their tracks. So you want to make sure that those time servers or NTPs, network time protocol servers are protected. Now, 10.7, we're looking at the failure of critical security control systems. We want to make sure that those failures are detected, reported, and promptly responded to. Requirement 11, testing of testing the security of systems and your network regularly. 11.1, policies. We want to make sure that the policies to test and the procedures to test your network and systems, they are defined and understood. 11.2 looks into wireless access points. So you want to identify it, you need to monitor it, and also address unauthorized access points. You need to have some sort of process in place to detect it. And when you detect it, how are you addressing it? Okay, then 11.3, external and internal vulnerabilities. We want to make sure that it's regularly identified, prioritized, and addressed. For external and internal penetration tests, we want to make sure it's performed regularly and exploitable. Now, this is a key here. So for 11.4, it says exploitable vulnerabilities. Now, because you might have thousands of vulnerabilities, but is that vulnerability exploitable? If the answer is no, then that's okay. But if it is exploitable, you need to demonstrate that that vulnerability was fixed, okay, and was corrected. Then once it's corrected, then the vulnerability team and the penetration team need to perform another test to make sure that that vulnerability was addressed, because you need that report to show or to prove to the QSA that that vulnerability was indeed addressed. Okay, so 11.5, we're looking at network intrusion and also unexpected file changes. You want to make sure it's detected and responded to. 11.6, unauthorized changes. This is something new to 4.0. So 4.0 introduced this. So unauthorized changes to payment pages, you want to make sure it's detected and responded, because you don't want someone having that maybe hacked your website and then redirects the payment. So when your customers swipe their card on your website or make payments on your website, they make changes to the code, and the payment is being redirected to somewhere else. So that's why you need to have a control in place to make sure that unauthorized changes to your web payment website or payment pages are detected and responded to. All right, so let's recommend 12, which is the last requirement for PCI. So recommend 12.1, we need a comprehensive information security policy that governs and provides direction for the protection of the organization's information asset. One, we want to make sure it's known and current. Then 12.2, acceptable use policy for end user technologies is one, defined and implemented. Then 12.3, risks to the cardholder data environment. We want to make sure it's formal or is formalized, then also identifies and evaluates and manages risk. Okay, so we want to understand. So that's what 12.3 addresses, the risk to your CDE. Okay, 12.4, PCI DSS compliance is managed. 12.5, we have to make sure that the PCI DSS scope is documented and validated. 12.6 addresses security awareness education is an ongoing activity. 12.7, we need the personnel that are going to be hired to be screened. Okay, we have to perform background checks, especially if they are going to be accessing or performing any sort of role or function within your CDE. So we want to make sure that the organization is performing background checks. 12.8, want to make sure that the risk to the information assets associated to your third-party provider is managed. Then 12.9, want to make sure that the third-party service providers, that they're actually supporting their customers' PCI DSS compliance. Then 12.10 addresses is one, okay, 12.10, sorry. When you suspect or confirm security incidents that could impact your CDE, you need to respond to it immediately. And this 12.10 has sub-controls that will tell you what to do to make sure that those controls are in place. All right. All right, so I think we're coming to an end. So we're going to look into the best practices for PCI DSS business as usual. So for you to be PCI is not only passing your compliance, but it's also a continuous monitoring thing. Okay, so PCI is, for example, you see organizations that have data breach, they might be PCI compliant, but what they would do when they perform the investigation was that organization PCI compliant at that point in time? So it's not just being compliant. That's what a lot of organizations or some people think. Oh, I was compliant last month. No, but the point is at the time of breach, were you compliant? So we have best practices to make sure that your business as usual processes are in place to reduce that. Okay. All right. Now, I won't go over this, because it's a lot, but if you get the opportunity, just go to page 9 of this documentation and you will see that. Okay. So I'll just give an example. Okay. So one example here is that as business as usual, we call it BAU activities, right? One, want to make sure that the overall responsibilities and accountability for PCI DSS to a team or to an individual is stated, okay, or identified, or some of the organizations, especially if you are being assessed as a service provider, you need what we call a PCI charter. And that will include the responsibility, accountability of everything. What you're doing for a PCI program must be addressed in that PCI charter. Then another thing you can do is to develop performance metrics to measure your PCI security initiatives or continuous monitoring programs for certain controls. Okay. Then also you can have a process in place to ensure that when a certain control fails, that is being addressed promptly. Okay. And within that process, you can see here is giving that one, you need to include the restoration of the control. You have to identify the root cause of the failure, identify and address any security issues that arose during the failure of that control. Okay. Then you need to implement some sort of mitigation, okay, to prevent this from recurring. Okay, then when resuming the monitoring of the controls, okay, you need to verify that it is operating properly. So these are some of the best practices that you can have. And this particular page 19 and 20, you can see that it addresses some of the business as usual processes and activities that you can do for continuous monitoring, okay, for your organization. All right. So, all right. Practical steps to PCI compliance. Practical steps. All right. So one, we need to understand your PCI scope. Okay. All right. Then two, you have to reduce your PCI scope, and you do that by implementing network segmentation and removing unnecessary storage of cardholder data when possible. You can also use tokenization if you want to. If your organization can afford it, that's the best way to descope some environments by using the tokenization. Three, perform readiness gap assessment. Four, develop a remediation plan. Okay, so you can create actionable steps. Some of them can be updating your firewall and things like that, implementing strong access control, in deploying anti-malware solution. So you have to develop some sort of remediation plan if you don't have this. Number five, implement security controls. So that can be deploying and configuration of security controls, can be a firewall, can be your IPS, IDS, can be your SIM tool, it can be your data loss prevention, okay? It can also be implementing encryption, okay? So if you don't have that, then you can make sure that your organization has that. Number six, maintain documentation. You'll be surprised. A lot of organizations don't have up-to-date documentation. Number seven, you need to conduct employee security awareness training. Okay, they need to know how to handle, cardholder data, what to do, what not to do, things like that. The best practices. Okay. Number eight, regularly test your security systems. And you can do that by, penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, okay, and reviewing of your logs. Okay. So number 9, if you are a level 1 merchant, you will engage a QSA. All right. So that's then for as a level 2, if you have the option, but level 1 is a must. Then number 10, complete the required PCI reports, and that can be your self-assessed questionnaire, Then your QSA would fill the report of compliance and also the attestation of compliance. And when you are done, then that will be submitted to your acquiring bank. Then 11, you need to monitor, maintain, and improve. All right. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed this. So please subscribe to my channel. I will be releasing more information. And if you find this lecture or session helpful, please forward this to your friends and let them also learn as well. Thank you. You all have a wonderful day.